But I go on this interview with Greg Kelly literally about 20 minutes after I found out I had been pardoned and just started crying on air. Wow. And I started crying because it just all started to hit me. And, I don't know if people fully know or appreciate, 5 people committed suicide because they could not bear what the government was doing to people. And they just couldn't handle it. And for them, a pardon came too late. But that's the part I think that really hit me.
Mainstream media gives you the impression that there is nothing good about America. In direct contrast to that, my podcasts will prove by examples that America has always been and still is the land of opportunity for everyone. Welcome to another episode in the series Life Lessons with Dr. Bob. My guest today is Brandon Straka, the founder and president of the WalkAway movement. This is his second visit with me. The first was 3 years ago. You can view that conversation in episode 21 in the series. Unfortunately, you can't find it on my YouTube channel because they took it down. Maybe it was too controversial. But you can watch it on Rumble. For those of you who don't know much about Brandon or don't have time to watch that first episode with him, I'm going to give you a brief summary, after which we'll have a conversation on what he's been doing the past 3 years, including his time on parole for being one of those insurrectionists on the Capitol grounds on January 6th, 2021. First, a bit of background. Brandon was a committed leftist for many years until 2018, when he had an epiphany and realized that everything he had been taught about America by the leftist organizations that he supported were false. He realized that he had been brainwashed. At that moment, he founded a political movement, the WalkAway campaign, and the related nonprofit, the WalkAway Foundation. The foundation's mission is to educate Americans about the intolerance of the left and to encourage them to walk away from the Democratic Party and instead to embrace unity, civility, respect, and belief in the American ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can think about WalkAway as an Alcoholics Anonymous for radicals and leftists who are unhappy with the negative propaganda about America that they've been taught to believe. Welcome to the show, Brandon.
Thank you. Can I just say your show is actually excellent? Truly, like that intro that you just did, I felt that way the last time I was with you too. Very well researched.
Thanks. I do.
Really
I spend a fair amount of time. And my son, who's younger, criticizes me. He said, "Dad, you're doing it wrong. It's just supposed to be a conversation." I said, "Well, that's how Joe Rogan does it, but
yeah.
Dr. Bob does it a different way.
Right.
I want to hit all the points that are relevant, and I want to give my guest, you tonight, the opportunity to speak without being interrupted, which of course doesn't happen on nightly news or anything like that.
Right.
They ask a complex question and can you summarize that in 5 seconds? And you can't. So we have plenty of time to go into depth into the issues that are affecting my guests and you tonight.
Love it.
So let's start with the January 6, 2021.
Right to it.
After Trump's defeat in the 2020 election, you joined the Stop the Steal campaign. You were in D.C. on January 6th. Tell us a story. Why did you go there? What did you see? And how long were you on the Capitol grounds?
So I was invited to go to D.C. on January 6th because I was a scheduled speaker. And so a lot of people don't know this. There was a second event that was scheduled, a permitted event on Capitol grounds. So President Trump was always scheduled to speak at the Ellipse. Then there was going to be a march from the Ellipse to the Capitol, and then a second event, a permitted event on Capitol grounds where dozens of people are going to speak, including members of Congress and a number of other people. Now, the Capitol grounds, it's huge, And there's different lots, I believe they're called. And so I think it was something like lot 6 had been
Allocated for this.
yeah, thank you, permitted.
Yep.
And so I was on my way to my speaking engagement. And as I was arriving, I started getting text messages from friends, family, people all over the country watching on television who were saying, we're hearing on the news that something's happening. There's some sort of incident taking place and that people are going inside the building. Well, I don't believe anything the news says ever. And I have a very large social media following and I'm here. So my thought was, if something's happening, I want to see for myself. I have the option, to capture it, upload it to social media. Probably more people see my post than watch CNN. So I thought, I have an opportunity here to debunk something that the media may be starting to create a narrative. So I started shooting a video and walking up to the east side of the Capitol. And in my video, you clearly see that the things are very calm on the east side. There's groups of people kind of scattered out on the outer grounds, which is where I started, and groups of 15, 20, whatever. People are standing around talking, smoking cigarettes. In my video, you see a woman pushing a baby stroller, people riding bicycles, not the energy of a violent attempt to overthrow the government.
Yeah.
And in my video, I continue to walk up the sidewalk on the east side, and I didn't realize at the time that it would later become relevant. But in my video, you see that off to the left side of the sidewalk and off to the right side of the sidewalk is bike rack, but that the sidewalk itself is completely open because the bike rack that maybe at one time had closed off the sidewalk had been completely opened up.
Yes.
There were no signs on the east side that said trespassing or don't walk beyond this point or anything like that, or grounds closed. There were 0 police officers on the east side of the building. And on the other side of that open sidewalk were hundreds, if not thousands, of people standing on the east side Capitol steps and outside the steps. So I walked into this crowd of people. And when I got there at the top of the steps on the east side of the Capitol, there was a man standing at the top, cupping his hands over his mouth like this. And he was shouting down, "They've opened the doors. They're letting us in. We're going inside. We're going inside." So I walked up to the top of the steps on the east side of the Capitol, and when I got there, sure enough, both of the large metal Columbus doors on the east side were both wide open, and there were a crowd of several hundred people at the top of the stairs. Some of them were trying to push their way in. The majority, like me, were just standing there shooting video.
Now, when you say shooting video, you had a photographer with you also, right?
No, it was just me.
Oh.
So it was just me, and I had hired 2 security guards. And the reason why I had hired security guards were not because I was afraid there would be a violent incident or anything, but because I needed to get from point A to point B, and they were there to keep me on time.
I see.
Yeah, because I was at the Ellipse watching President Trump speak. I mean, there were hundreds of thousands of people at the Ellipse. And in fact, my security told me I could not do the march, which I was disappointed about because I love doing that. They said, "You'll never get there on time because everyone's going to stop and take pictures. You have to take the DC Metro," which is what I did. And then, once I got there, that's when I started getting the messages, something's happening at the Capitol. So I got to the top of the stairs. The doors are open. Some people are pushing their way in. And I stood outside of the building for 8 minutes with my camera fully above my head, pointed down shooting, because there were so many people. But I was about 35 feet away from the open doors, hundreds of people between me and the open doors. And a lot of the people were taller than me. A lot of them had flags that were hanging down on poles. So I took my camera, pointed it down like this so that it could see what my eyes could not see. And after about 8 minutes, a man came out of the building, got on a bullhorn. He was, I believe, a protester. And he got on a bullhorn and he said, "They've cleared Congress. Everyone's left the building. Move out, move out." And I immediately turned around and left and even told the people behind me, they're saying to move out, go this way. So to be clear, I never entered the Capitol on January 6th. Didn't engage in any violence, vandalism, theft, or destruction, and I didn't even witness any. It's not even like I was standing there while other people were breaking windows or fighting with officers. Everyone was just standing there, and then some people were walking through the open doors, kind of pushing their way in.
So you didn't even see them breaking windows? Or no way.
No. If I had seen people breaking windows, or if I had seen people, being aggressive with police officers or something, I would have at that point
Filmed it.
Well, filmed it, but I also would have said something.
Right.
I would have been like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, stop.
Like, stop
You wouldn't
it.
say go, go, go.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Right.
And and let me take that a step further. If I did for some reason lose my mind and decide to do that, I wouldn't then upload the video to social media so that all of my followers could see me do it.
Right.
You know, well, we'll get to that in a moment. I'll make that point in a second. But that is what I saw. And I then took that video that I had just shot, which ended up being about 8 minutes long, a little bit, and I uploaded it to Twitter.
And you just did it on your regular cell phone? Is that what you
Yeah, I
used?
shot it on my cell phone, and I uploaded it to Twitter. And one of the reasons why I uploaded it to Twitter, I mean, I would have done it anyway. But while I was still at the Capitol, I started getting messages from the Tucker Carlson show, from Newsmax, from, you know, saying, are you there? Are you seeing anything? And can you come on the show tonight? And I said, yeah, I can come on the show tonight. And so the Tucker show expressed interest in having me on. So I thought to myself, well, I better get back to my hotel room and change. You know, I was wearing, you know, jeans and you know, sweater or whatever. But I thought, you know, I better go now because it's going to take a while to get back. So I started heading back to my hotel room. And my thought was, I might as well upload my footage now so it'll start to circulate. So by the time I go on the show, people will already be somewhat familiar with exactly.
And to be on the show, there's no studio you go to. It's just from your phone?
No. I would have gone to a studio in D.C.
Oh, in D.C.
Yeah,
there is a studio.
By satellite, have interviewed with Tucker. And so, I've done it before, so I kind of knew the amount of time I would need to prepare. Plus, since there were hundreds of thousands of people in D.C., you got to allow extra time to get around. And so by the time I got back to my hotel room to change for the show, I got a message from the show saying, we're not going to have you on tonight. The story is changing. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, what does that mean? The story is changing. So that's when, for the first time, I turned on my TV in my hotel room and I started to see the footage of what had happened on the other side of the building.
Got it. I see.
That's when I started to see people breaking windows and things like that, which was not happening where I was. And I got confused. I was like, is this happening now? Like, did something break out after I left, or, you know, what is going on?
It was the same time.
It was a confusing thing. And since I didn't know, I decided it was a good idea to take my video down because I was like, I don't want people to think I'm there. Whatever's happening, I don't get it, you know? And so I took the video down, and it had only lived on Twitter for maybe an hour or two between me posting it and being taken down. But that was long enough for these left-wing lunatics to copy it. And then they began posting it and reposting it every single day for weeks.
But your video wasn't so interesting, right?
That's what I thought. Yeah. You know, they kept reposting it and tagging the FBI and the DOJ and telling them that I was there, I was a part of the insurrection, and that they should come and get me. And
so these were not friends.
No, these were people on the left who are crazy.
Right.
Right.
Who know you.
They
know of you.
Yeah, who know of me and hate me because
you.
of the work I've done advocating for people to leave the Democratic Party and the success of the WalkAway movement. And so, to your point, not such an interesting video. People were saying to me, "Are you worried?" And I said, "Well, I'm not super comfortable with what's happening here, but I'm not worried because I didn't break the law, and my video shows I didn't do anything. You know, so what do I have to be worried about, right?" So imagine my surprise. 2.5 weeks later.
So you went home.
Yeah.
You didn't get interviewed by Tucker or by Newsmax.
Yep.
You go home and you're not thinking about it anymore.
Not much. I mean, at that point, I was basically thinking about, you know, what's next for WalkAway. And to be really honest with you, as disappointed as I was about how things turned out for Trump and that he was not going to have a second term, I thought I was kind of excited in a way for the next 4 years of WalkAway under Democrat leadership because I knew the disaster that was about to unfold. And I thought, well, this is going to be like shooting fish in a barrel.
Right. Easy to get people to switch.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they're going to see the difference. Great. I thought, let's make the best of this. But that became very difficult because 2.5 weeks after January 6th, on the morning of Monday, January 25th,
in Omaha, Nebraska, I woke up at dawn to a team of FBI agents in tactical gear storming my apartment, getting me out of bed,
putting me in handcuffs, and they began stripping my apartment of my computers, phones, iPads, hard drives, thumb drives, camera equipment, clothing, and cuffed me and told me that they were taking me to jail on multiple felony charges for what I had done on January 6th. And I very reflexively said, I said, felonies. I said, I didn't even commit any crimes. And the agent said to me, oh, I saw your video. I saw what you did. And now here's the crazy thing. I had never watched my own video. I shot it.
Yeah.
I uploaded it to Twitter. Yeah. I took it down a couple hours later. But once they told me they weren't going to have me on any of the news shows, I didn't really care. You know,
right.
I
Why would I watch it?
Never looked at it.
Right.
So when this man tells me I'm facing multiple felonies for what I did, I didn't say anything. But in my brain, I'm going, what the hell did I do? Like, and I was trying to replay that day in my mind going, did I do something and I don't remember it? You know, like, what the hell? And I got taken to jail, sat there in a 24-hour lockdown for 2.5 days.
They booked you.
Oh, yeah. I was
fingerprints, photographs, the whole business.
Fingerprints, photographs, orange jumpsuit, and plastic sandals, and put me in an 8x8 concrete cell with a metal door. Told me that I would be in there for 2 weeks before being put into general population, and which was honestly the hardest part for me. I'm extremely claustrophobic, and I wouldn't like to go to jail. I wouldn't like to go to prison, but I could handle it. You know, I could deal with it. I'm not equipped to deal with being put in an 8x8 concrete cell for 2 weeks and have them shut the door. But
what kind of prison is in Omaha, Nebraska?
Well, it's called Douglas County Jail, so it's a county jail. But it's I mean, I can't imagine what the difference could be between prison and this, because I was in, you know, again, the same exact type of 8x8 cell, and everybody there is wearing orange jumpsuits, has tattoos on their face, no teeth, bulging eyes, and crazy looking people. And
so I think, just for the audience, the difference between jail and prison: jail is local; it's a community or city or state, whereas prison means more serious crimes, federal crimes.
Yeah, but the people in jail are no fun either. I can tell you that much.
I don't think it matters.
Yeah, no, I had a cellmate during the time I was there, and he was a 4-time repeat offender that they put me in with, and in there for his 4th stint on drug charges and things like that. So it wasn't great.
So they didn't give you access to an attorney. They read you your rights, right? Or I
think so.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, hard to remember.
Right.
But No, I didn't have an attorney at the time. However, I was able to make a phone call when I went in. So I called a member of my team, one of my employees, explained what was going on. She got to work trying to find me an attorney, and I knew she wouldn't let me down. So I knew it was happening.
I see.
But I was just in there kind of waiting. And it took 2.5 days before I was able to go before a judge. They took me into another cell, and it was a virtual hearing. So put me in another concrete cell, shut the door, and then I was sitting in front of a computer that lit up, and all of a sudden there was a federal judge and a federal prosecutor and an attorney who was my attorney and me. And the judge said, this is the case of the United States of America versus Brandon Straka, which was the first time I cried. And I don't cry that much. And I probably, honestly, in the last 4+ years, cried maybe 4 times over January 6th. But that was one of them, because it was that devastated me to hear those words. And yeah, it was horrible. I mean, I had just spent the previous 2.5 years traveling the country, raising money and going around the country, going into colleges, going into minority communities, doing these events, trying to get people to wake up and think for themselves, because I have been so worried and concerned about the trajectory our country was on and what was going to happen to our nation. Now our country is versus me in criminal court, as though I'm an enemy of the country. And
did the prosecutors know that you have that organization WalkAway? Oh, they knew. Okay.
Oh,
and that's why they're
100%.
leaning on. If you were just an ordinary guy, they probably wouldn't have even arrested you.
Right, and it's not even a matter of opinion. The reason why I say this so confidently is because the judge ordered my release, which, by the way, the government didn't fight for. They that was actually humorous in a way, like perversely humorous, because the prosecutor said, "Your Honor," he's very jovial, "Your Honor, we know Mr. Strzok didn't engage in any violence, vandalism, theft, or destruction, and we know that Mr. Strzok didn't go in the Capitol. So, Your Honor, the government is comfortable not seeking detention of Mr. Strzok pending his trial." And I think to myself, okay, if you know all of these things, why did you just send a SWAT team into my apartment like they're searching for Osama bin Laden?
Yes.
And throw me in this, like, are you kidding? But once I got out of jail, that's when I was able to read. So the government filed an 8-page charging document against me. And the majority of it talked about my work with WalkAway. Mr. Strzok has this organization, WalkAway Campaign. He travels around the country encouraging people to leave the Democratic Party. He has a very large social media following. He's an influential person in the world of politics. And that's why his actions on January 6th are particularly egregious, because it's not like he's just some hillbilly from wherever who came to the Capitol. He went there knowing that people follow him and support him and listen to him, and that's why what he did is he's got to be taught a lesson and a deterrent. So I mean, they weren't even it was very candidly out there that this was a major
WalkAway
influence in why they did what they did. But yeah, no. So then what I learned was that they were accusing me of encouraging people to go inside the building. They claimed that I witnessed the crowd taking a shield from a police officer and that I shouted, take it, to encourage the crowd to take the shield from an officer. They said that I went into the restricted area of the Capitol grounds knowing that the grounds were restricted and that I was breaking the law, but that I chose to do it anyway. I mean, they didn't have that much to even create. It's not like they could say, oh, he punched an officer in the face, and because there were no officers visible around. But what they could do is create a lot of innuendo to make it seem as though I went there with an intention to stir up the mob and to try to get, to create anarchy and to get people to storm the building and do what they're going to do. None of these things are true. But this is the first time, when you interviewed me a couple of years ago.
You weren't free at that time to comment honestly and openly because you were on parole.
Well, because I had signed a plea deal.
I see.
Yeah, because they charged me. They did charge me with multiple felonies and a misdemeanor. And they threatened to add a third felony, which is the now stricken down by the Supreme Court, the 1512 obstruction of an official proceeding felony, which they made sure to tell everybody this carries up to 20 years in prison, and they said, or this can all go away if you plead guilty to a misdemeanor, sign our statement of offense, which is basically the confession that they write on your behalf. And that's the choice that I made, because everybody connected with January 6th who went to trial, who dared to defend themselves, the government's getting a 100% conviction rate against all of these people.
Well, it's in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Right. And all of these people are getting anywhere from 3 months up to 22 years in federal prison because they're going to trial. And so I knew that was not an option. So I took the misdemeanor plea deal.
Did your attorney try to talk down the claims that they were trying to make you sign?
Well, we told them that those allegations were not true, and the response that we got from them was, well, if that's how he feels, he's welcome to go to trial and say that to a judge and jury. But if he wants to take a plea deal, this is how we see things.
I see.
And
it's take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it. That was the deal. I took it, which was a nightmare for so many reasons, a nightmare. But, one of the things that was the most horrible about it is, it's hard to put into words how psychologically and emotionally distressing it is to be forced to say you did something you didn't do. Even if it's not, I wasn't accused of murder, but I was accused of encouraging anarchy and encouraging, I don't know if you would call it violence, but certainly disorderliness towards police officers, which is something I would never do. And the purpose of that was to try to erode the trust between me and my followers and my audience and my donors and supporters. I mean, who wants to support a guy who goes to the Capitol and tells everyone to harm police, right?
Yeah.
And
you had to sign it because the alternative was going to trial, knowing it would be not in Omaha, Nebraska, but it would be in Washington, D.C.
That's right.
Which is obviously blue, and they would pack the jury with jurors who were against violence against the government, as you're against violence against the government.
Yep.
But it would mean that you would face, if you were convicted on all those charges, which would be a possibility, up to 30 years in federal prison.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I mean, it's not just blue. I mean, these people hate Donald Trump, and they hate people who vote for Donald Trump. And it's I think it's worth mentioning. It's a very I don't know if it's minority majority, but I mean, there's an enormous amount of people of color in D.C. that are ending up on these juries, and they've been told for 5, 6, whatever years that Trump supporters are racist. And white supremacists. Right. So now they're sitting in judgment of people that they think are bigots and racist, and of course, they're going to take advantage of the opportunity to dish out some justice to these people. Or so they say.
One positive thing that I didn't realize is that they spoke in your favor about not keeping you in jail until your trial.
Right.
So that probably the judge would never have agreed to that anyway. But
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. And yes, obviously that was very, very helpful, and I was happy about that.
Not being in jail is pretty good.
And the majority of people that wasn't, that is kind of, I think, one of the things that people misunderstand. It's looking back on these last 4 years, there's just so much stuff that all of us have had to endure. But there were a number of people, not many, thank goodness, but there were definitely people on the right who were like, well, why did you get out and the others didn't? What did you do? And it's like, it wasn't just me. I mean, the majority of us
got out, right.
Didn't have to be in jail pending trial, and which is not to say the others deserved it. But for the people who, think about it this way, almost 1,600 people were charged for January 6th. And of them, probably 150 or less were held pending trial. It wasn't that many in proportion. And those people were probably people who were accused of violence, accused of destruction, or accused of a seditious conspiracy plan, which is absurd. But it wasn't as though I was the only one,
But it took about a year between the time that you were arrested and charged to the time that you signed the plea deal, right? It was about a year. Why would it take that long? Was that up to them? They were just dragged. Okay.
Yes.
It was up to them.
So, and that's another important point that you're making is, when I got out of jail, like literally the next day when I got out of jail, I met with my attorney for the first time. And he told me that he had already been on the phone with the prosecutors during those days that I was in jail. And he told me they've expressed that they're open to a plea deal. They're open to dropping felonies if you'll plead guilty to a misdemeanor. So those conversations had already begun.
Right. So why would it take a year?
Right. So they told me that if I pled guilty, my case would likely be resolved within 60 to 90 days.
Yeah.
So that sounded like a good deal to me, and that was part of what influenced me to say, I'm going to do this. However, we get to the end of the first night because they had 90 days that they had to make a decision.
Oh, I see.
We got to day 89, and they say we need 90 more days. So then you get to day 80. They wait until day 89.
During that period, are you have a supervisor or anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So before you're convicted, you have a pretrial supervisor, which is the same as a probation officer, but it's called a pretrial officer. Right. And it's the exact same stipulations. You have to check in every week.
So you're on probation, essentially.
Yeah. For
that time.
That's exactly right.
So essentially what they're trying to do is extend the probation period.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, and it's more than just that. I mean, it's, you hear the phrase, the process is the punishment. Right. I mean, that whole process that you're going, and every time they extend your case, it creates another wave of horrible media where the media was just salivating over these J6 cases and calling people terrorists and insurrectionists. And And so to answer your question, they extended my case 5 times. And they did this 5 times, 90 more days, 90 more days, 90 more days, 90
and there's
more
nothing
days.
your lawyer could do to say, hey, we don't have to agree to that.
Of course, I was saying, tell them no. Tell them no. Right. And my lawyer said, well, if we tell them no, they're just going to go to the judge. The judge is going to give it to them. And then you've fallen out of favor with them because you weren't cooperative. So it's in your best interest to be cooperative and just say, yes, that's fine. And then the judge grants it and whatever.
Wow.
But to add insult to injury, obviously, I didn't support any of these extensions. I was against every single one of them. Right. What the government would do is once we went back to them and said, fine, we agree, 90 more days, then the government would draft a memo to the court saying, Mr. Straka has requested 90 more days in his case.
And that's rubbing salt on the wound.
Yeah. Every single time. That's what they would do.
Why on earth would the defendant want an extension?
Because they would say we weren't adequately prepared. Yeah.
I see.
They would say, Mr.
They're
Straka's
not prepare. They're going to give you a piece of paper to sign.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, but I mean, any opportunity to throw salt on the wound, make your life harder, and make the process as painful as possible.
Were you happy with the attorney? He gave you good advice, or would you have been better with an Alan Dershowitz?
I wonder. I always wonder. So I technically had 2 attorneys. One I called my primary attorney. One was my secondary attorney. They couldn't have been more different. The primary attorney was more. I describe him as more like cool-headed and passive. The secondary attorney was a little more aggressive, but also a bit of an alarmist. And I still have a good relationship with my secondary attorney. The primary attorney, I will always wonder if things could have been different because, I wasn't there for a lot of conversations he had with the government. I was getting these conversations, secondhand, but I don't know that he fought for me as much as maybe could have been possible. I've always wondered because I saw him at times fall apart in front of the judge. So I'm like, wow, was that what was happening with the prosecution too? Were you just allowing them to steamroll But that being said, I know the way everybody's cases turned out and all different people had all different attorneys and we all got the same bad results.
I see.
So it's one of those things that plays with your head, but in all likelihood, there was no good result for January 6th.
Yeah.
Everybody was doomed.
Well, there were 2 parts to your penalty. I'll call one part the direct punishment and the other part the indirect punishment. The direct punishment was 3 years of probation after that after already being on for a year. So how did being on probation for 3 years affect your life?
Well, first of all, I was also put on house arrest as part of my sentence. So I did get 3 years of probation. That's true. And that was after a year of being on pretrial supervision. But initially, before just the 3 years, the judge sentenced me to 3 months of house arrest.
Oh, I don't recall that.
That's right. So that means I had to have an ankle tracking monitor put on. And then for 90 days, I was not allowed to leave my apartment.
Even to go shopping or to
nothing. And I couldn't even go down to get my mail in my lobby. I mean, you're not allowed out of the 4 corners of your apartment. So they have your probation officer come over and you have to stand in each of the corners of your home.
They map it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, and it's one of the great disparities really kind of house arrest because, you're me, you live in a 1-bedroom apartment. You're somebody who has a 20,000 foot estate. Your house arrest
I wouldn't, basically, I'm on house arrest every day.
I didn't want to call you out.
Yeah.
But for your audience, Dr. Bob has a very nice house. If I was on house arrest here, might be a different story. Yeah, I'd be totally fine. But for 3 months, confined to my apartment, and it's better than being in prison for sure, no doubt about that. But it does It does take a toll on you in a way, psychologically, and it's kind of weird. It's been years since I was on house arrest, but I still find myself at times in my apartment staring out my window and being like, "Oh yeah, you can go outside." If
Now,
you want
was
to.
that part of the plea deal? Did you understand that you were going to
Nope.
be under house arrest? Oh,
Nope, they wouldn't, and that was
oh,
another.
they wouldn't even indicate what the penalty was going to be.
Not at
you
all.
have to say, I agree to these crimes without knowing what was going to happen.
Exactly
what the
right.
punishment.
That was another very strange thing about January 6th, and that's pretty atypical because I think in most situations, if you're taking a plea deal, they'll say in exchange for this plea deal, we're not going to ask for jail time, or we're
Right.
or
Or here's
we'll get
what's
7
going to
days, or they wouldn't say. And almost everybody, even who pled guilty to a misdemeanor, was getting 2-3 months in federal prison. So I do think the fact that I didn't enter the building helped me significantly. And the fact that I shut my mouth, that's not a judgment on anybody else, but I'm probably the only January 6th defendant who took my lawyer's advice. My lawyer told me on day one, I need you to disappear. I disappear. He said, no news interviews, no social media, no events, no fundraising, no whatever. And I did.
Right.
And that went on for a year. I mean, I
Right.
just disappeared. And I think that they didn't feel as vengeful toward me because of that.
That's probably right. I was just thinking that your attorney, somebody should have said, well, he's going to sign this plea deal, pleading guilty to these misdemeanors, but you have to tell us what you're going to ask the court as punishment.
Yeah.
Maybe he did ask that, but that would have been helpful.
They wouldn't though, and they didn't for anybody. I mean, it was like a great roulette wheel for all of us. Yeah,
Wow.
and I can tell you too, we were shocked when they came back with their sentencing recommendation because my lawyer had told me, and again, you have to remember, even whether I had this lawyer or a different lawyer. Every lawyer who's dealt with a J6 case, it's like a community of lawyers now, and they have this term that they use. They call it J6 jurisprudence, meaning what it's like to practice the law under the umbrella of January 6th, which is outside the norms of anything these lawyers have ever dealt with before. Even seasoned lawyers with decades of federal trial experience have never seen anything like this. My lawyer had told me, you don't have a criminal record. It's your first offense. It's a Class B misdemeanor. And he said, you already spent several days in jail when they raided you and arrested you. He said, nobody goes to jail on a first offense misdemeanor. He said, the judge is going to give you time served and this will be behind you.
Right.
So then when the government came back a week before sentencing and presented us with a 30-page sentencing recommendation, which included that they wanted 4 months of house arrest, 3 years of probation. They wanted the right to surveil my computers, my social media, my email accounts for 3 years, community service, fines, fees, restitution, all sorts of stuff. We were like, we just couldn't believe it. And my attorney said, I don't know what's going to happen at this point, but he was like, surely the judge is not going to go for this. Well, she went for all of it. The only thing she gave me was, instead of 4 months of house arrest, she gave me 3. And she did tell the government that they did not have the right to surveil my computers and my social media and my email and things like that. But other than that, I got 3 months of house arrest, 3 years of probation, 60 hours of community service, fines, fees, restitution, and court-ordered mental health services. Because obviously I'm insane because I voted for Donald Trump.
Right. This sounds like the gulag, for Christ's sake.
It was absolutely nuts. And then to answer your question about, what is 3 years of probation like? Well, I mean, we're talking about regular check-ins with a probation officer, drug testing, ongoing drug testing. I've been sober for over 10 years, and ongoing drug testing. And then I couldn't leave the district that I lived in without permission from the court. So someone like me who, pre-January 6th, I mean, I was traveling to 3 cities a week. Yeah. And the thing is, it's not even state to state, it's district to district. So California, for instance, 5 different districts. So, there was a time a couple of years ago where I had requested permission to go see one of my donors and spend time with them, which was granted. And that was in San Diego. So I went to San Diego, posted on social media that I was with one of my donors. One of my donors in Los Angeles saw the post and said, hey, you're close by. Can you come have dinner with me Friday night? Sure, I can. Call my probation officer. No, Los Angeles is a different district than San Diego. You can't go. So I had to tell my donor I could not have dinner with them on Friday night because a city 2 hours away from San Diego was a different district. And I didn't have permission to go.
So your probation officer wasn't very responsive to the fact that you never did anything wrong. They never asked you that. They just go by the book. You did this. You said you did this, and here's the penalty.
Well, I'll say this:
they weren't sympathetic. Not at all. These people deal with hardened criminals.
Right.
I would think that they say, Brandon, do whatever you want to do. Come in next month and we'll talk.
I couldn't use the word sympathetic because she was never. So let me start by saying this. She was extremely nice, and I was extremely lucky to have the probation officer that I had. It could have been so much worse, and I'm so grateful that I had her. That being said, she was extremely professional and never tipped her hand to me about how she felt about politics or felt about me, and never tipped her hand to me about how she felt about my case. Other than the fact that in the course of following the rules, which she always did, she always made me feel like she was just following the rules that she had to follow and not making things harder than they needed to be. And there were very few slip-ups. I mean, I really abided by the rules, and I tried to respect what...
Right, but I would have thought that she'd say, well, it's a close district, I give you permission.
Yeah.
That she had that ability to do, right? I assume she had that flexibility.
I don't know that she did
because she gave you permission to go to San Diego, right?
But look at it this way. So it's not just a matter of her discretion. She has to contact the district and get their permission as well. Now, let's say that I had driven from San Diego to Los Angeles. I got to Los Angeles and I got pulled over by a police officer. So now there's record of me being in Los Angeles, which she didn't call Los Angeles and get permission to get either. Now she's in trouble, you know?
I see.
So, yeah.
I see.
Yeah. So it's
serious penalty. But the second part of the penalty was perhaps just as problematic. They canceled you. They tried to make both you and WalkAway disappear. So now elaborate on how you were canceled.
Well, so the group that I had created, #WalkAway campaign, which at that point had grown to over 500,000 people, and we had tens of thousands of testimonial videos of people and stories of people sharing about why they walked away from the Democratic Party. Facebook eliminated the group, banned all, and deleted all the content, took everything. I didn't even have time to mourn that or deal with that because I was too busy fighting for my life at the time. But I mean, that was hugely devastating to WalkAway as a whole. But in addition to that, I mean, within, I'd say, the first 30 days of me getting arrested, both I as an individual, Brandon Straka, and the WalkAway organization, WalkAway Foundation, even though WalkAway had nothing to do with January 6th, I wasn't there. WalkAway didn't pay for me to go. I wasn't there on behalf of WalkAway. So it was just an opportunity to hurt us, you know, because it was totally no connection whatsoever. But WalkAway was permanently banned by PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, Patreon. The next 5 or 6 email services that we were using, MailChimp, they banned us. Then we switched to Constant Contact, they banned us. And it just, the next series of 5, 6 email services, we were banned by banks, payment processors. So nearly everything digitally that you would need to do business in the year 2020 and beyond banned us permanently. So in 2021, because remember this was January 2021, we went about 8 months without even being able to process a donation from our donors because we couldn't. I mean, not only did we not have the payment processors, we didn't have the donor portals, we didn't have banks, we didn't have, I mean, it was a mess. And so it took us all of those, and we'd start with a new service and then they would ban us, and start with another and they would ban us. So it took us about that long. And we finally got to the point where we're like, we need to find conservative, Republican-run businesses. We need to sit down and have conversations with them, explaining the situation and get assurances that they will not ban us. And then we need to custom build a lot of these things, which is what we did. So we had to literally custom build a payment processor for us, a donor portal for us, all these things, which took time. And then we had to migrate as much as we could the recurring donors that we had. And we lost about 65% of our monthly recurring donors in that migration, not because they didn't want to support us anymore.
They couldn't. There was no
and
way.
we couldn't even contact them to tell them it had happened. We couldn't email them. So, I mean, people thought they were still supporting us, and we couldn't even contact them and tell them that they weren't. And so after about, 8 months, I'd say we got back up and running, started reaching out to some bigger donors at that point who stuck with us. Some people didn't. Thank God the majority did. But there were some that said, I don't want to be connected anymore to all the, it's too hot. I don't want to get investigated myself.
Well, that was the goal of the punishment. That was
right.
the goal.
That's right. But we got some money coming back in. To be honest with you, we did really well that year, considering it was our worst year financially. But I mean, the number could have been zero. And it wasn't, so we kept going. I didn't have to let any of my team go, which was scary. And that, by the way, I mean, let's take a moment to kind of honor that, because even though I didn't do anything wrong, really, I still felt guilty and responsible, because I have a team. I'm responsible for these people's paychecks, and I'm responsible for, their children's getting doctor's care, going to school, and all of these things if their parents don't have a job. And the idea that I might have to fire employees or let people go because of what was happening to me, I was like, I'm not going to let this happen. And thank God it didn't. Like, no one had to lose their job. And then going into 2022, that's when I was on house arrest. And so about halfway into 2022, I finally, after January of 2021, was able to go out and start working again, doing rallies, doing events, getting into colleges, and doing all the stuff we do. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was the same, because it wasn't.
No.
First of all, the whole culture around the country was depressed and fearful and apprehensive, and having me there, people were worried about it, and they were worried about, we're having this J6. I was no longer the WalkAway guy. I was the J6 guy,
right?
Which is gross, and I hate it.
Different story.
Yeah.
In view of all the hurdles, how did you maintain your sanity and keep the momentum in the movement alive during the 3 years that you were, actually 4 years, that you weren't allowed to really be who you are?
Yeah. Well, regarding the sanity, first of all, I'm not sure I did. I always say that. No, I mean, honestly.
I give you a lot of credit, because your past, which we didn't go into in this podcast, but a prior podcast, you were addicted to alcohol, you had drug issues, and one would think that given the pressures that the government put you in and the penalties that they that they put you under, that you would have reverted. So I admire you for the fact that you didn't do that.
I appreciate that. I think that there's something to the fact that when that's what somebody's trying to do to you. And you if it's the only thing you have left, you say, I'm not going to let them have that. Like, I'm not. Believe me, I thought about it. It's not like I sat around craving alcohol or drugs, but you certainly get to a point where there's so much destruction.
Yeah, I could use a drink
here.
Point? Right.
Yeah. Like what is the point? What is the point of trying to stay sober? Like wrecked everything.
Right. They really tried to destroy you.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. And they did succeed in some areas. They didn't destroy me, but they
weakened the organization.
They severely damaged me, the organization, and the momentum, and all of those things. And I'm going to say something to you right now that, I guess you're not supposed to say, but it's the truth, and I always tell the truth. What kept me going during certain periods was hate and a real desire for vengeance, and
valid. I'm not a Christian, as you know. Jews don't believe in turning the other cheek.
Good.
The Bible is filled with acts of vengeance and battles that we've won. And one of the problem with leftist Jews is that they're too passive. They're too passive.
Yeah. See, I did grow up Christian, and so I was told all the time that there's no place for hate, and hate is a useless emotion. And I think I really learned through this last 4 years, not the value, but that there is a time and place for hate. I don't think it's necessarily a wasted emotion if hate is what is keeping you alive at times. Not the only thing. I'm not saying that's all I had, but I think that there were times where I would have just said to myself, I just need to get through this case and I'm done. I'm going to go, work at Walmart or just do to hell with all of this, right? And then there are times I just thought to myself, no, these people need to pay for what they did. I need to get as many people to see the light and leave the Democratic Party as possible because we have to win in 24 or we're doomed. And also what I built is so unique and I think phenomenal and necessary. No, I'm not going to just cave and let them take it and let them destroy it.
And you did go forward, even though you were in probation at the time.
Yep.
You the WalkAway, you revived it, you kept it running.
That's right.
And you did some interesting programs. Tell me about some of them.
Yeah, and so if we were to just talk about the last, let's say, 3 years, because of course there was the whole year where I disappeared. But once I was able to come back, which was really about 2.5 years, given my house arrest, we went into D.C. And we did the WalkAway Black Americans debate, which you were a big part of sponsoring. And that was a phenomenal event. I mean, absolutely incredible. But we continued to go to colleges all over the country.
So the government didn't enforce any restrictions on what you could do.
That's right.
Wow.
Right.
Okay. Wonderful. That's a positive.
Yeah. Now, I mean, and I did not allow them to get into my head to the point where I said, let's not do this or let's do that. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't always a dark cloud over everything. Right. Because a lot of what we do is controversial. And a lot of what we do attracts Antifa, attracts people on the left. There have been a number of times at WalkAway events where these people have shown up and either gotten physical with me or other people, or caused disruption.
Disruptive,
that's right,
for sure.
Now, depending on where you are, it's almost guaranteed that you're not going to find justice in these situations because let's say you go to Portland or Seattle or something, and Antifa comes. They're the one, you're going to be portrayed as the aggressor, not them.
You caused the trouble.
That's right. But it's one thing to be in a situation like that, when Donald Trump is the president and things. It's another to be in a situation like that when Joe Biden is the president and the Democrats are controlling everything.
When the Justice Department already has it in for you.
Right. So I'd be lying if I didn't say I was a little extra worried that those things could take place.
But nevertheless, you still went forward.
I still went forward.
And then you had a campaign called the Political Prosecution Tour.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, that's coming up. That's actually coming up. So that's going to be one of the next things that we're doing this year. And so, every year I travel around the country going into colleges, and we always go into minority communities with WalkAway because one of the things I wanted to do with the WalkAway organization is I always say, fill in the holes of where I feel like the conservative movement is failing. And one of the ways in which I saw that the conservative movement is failing is connecting effectively with minority communities.
Yes. They did better. They did better in this recent election.
Better.
Right.
They have gotten better, but we still have a long way to go. And honestly, I would say that at the time when I started WalkAway, which has now been, in May, it'll be 7 years, we were pretty much the only ones at the time that were out there doing that. And still, I don't feel like the Republican Party does what we do, but at least they're kind of trying like now. But in terms of this tour, okay, let's look at this, for instance. The Black community has been saying for decades that they're targeted by law enforcement, that they're disproportionately victims of the criminal justice system. Now, we can discuss and debate the validity of some of these claims, certainly. But what I can do absolutely now is go in there and say, look, I am somebody who has been on the receiving end of the targeting of the justice system. I know exactly what your claims feel like. And look, there's one party who's demonizing convicted felons. About 33% of Black men are convicted felons. 33%, that's astronomical.
Huge.
Isn't that unbelievable? And now, the Democrat Party that at one time portrayed themselves as proponents of criminal justice reform and friends and advocates of justice-impacted people. Well, the moment that Donald Trump, they saw an opportunity to make Donald Trump into a convicted felon. Now they think convicted felons are the scum of the earth and shouldn't be allowed to breathe or live or exist in society. So my message right now, I want to go into the Black community. I want to go into colleges and talk to young people. But I want to say, which party is demonizing justice impacted people and convicted felons, and which party elected one to be president of the United States, right? So I mean, if these are issues that concern you, like consider rethinking who you're supporting, because it's a whole different Republican Party now. It's a different
Democrat Party for sure.
100%, absolutely it is.
Now, you did kick off a program, what was it called? The $100,000 WalkAway video program, where you gave incentives, cash incentives, for people to make their own video about why they walked away.
It was $10,000. We're not there yet. Okay. I look forward to the day that we can do the $100,000 challenge. But no, what we did was we called it the WalkAway $10,000 Testimonial Video Challenge.
Yes.
And so what we did is we asked people to submit their testimonial videos to us, as people have now for almost 7 years.
Wow, great.
Yeah. But we gave away a variety. We ran it kind of like a game show just to make it kind of fun, right?
Sure.
So if I recall, I believe that third place got $500, second place got $1,000, and first place got a $10,000.
Really, $10,000.
$10,000 cash prize, and then we gave out T-shirts and merch and stuff like that too. But we told people, like, we're judging these videos on various criteria. The first and most important thing is your story and how heartfelt and sincere your story is about why you walked away from liberalism and the Democratic Party. But then we're awarding extra points.
By the way, you should use the term leftism.
Leftism.
Right, because we're all liberals. We have liberal views about most things.
Right.
It's leftists that's the problem.
You're right. You're right about that. No, you're right about that. So why you walked away from leftism, the Democrat Party. And then we're awarding extra points for things like creativity or
video value.
Absolutely. Yeah. So our first place winner, that's right, I had to think. Our first place winner actually created a song and a music video in his testimonial, and it was good. It was legitimately good.
Fantastic.
I mean, he put so much effort into this.
And do you put these on your web? Are these available? They're available on your website.
Yeah, so we shared them on our X accounts. We shared them on Facebook.
Fantastic.
We shared them on our YouTube channel and our website. So these guys got a lot of exposure, which they were excited about. They also got cash prizes, which they were excited about. But it got, I think it got a sense of fun and play around this very genuine experience that people are having.
And it gets, I think, having other faces other than you telling your story, which we already know. It's new faces, young faces.
That's right.
And that will help convince other people to walk away.
I mean, two of our top three were Black guys. I mean, young Black guys. And so this guy who won, he was a pretty young Black guy who made a music video and shared his story about walking away. The guy I think who got second place was actually a rapper, and he had done like a rap video, but for his walk away video, he just did like, I think, kind of a standard video. But yeah, I mean, we had a really diverse cross section of people who shared their stories, and we would love to do a contest like that every quarter, like maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year. If funding allows, but it was a really cool and I think unique way of getting people excited.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Changing the topic, your views on America are much aligned with those of President Trump. So, did you get involved with his most recent political campaign?
I did not. And I also didn't push the issue because I didn't want to put him in a tough situation. To have somebody connected with January 6th.
I see.
Insisting that I be a part of the team. I would have loved it. I'm sure they would have loved it, probably, to some degree. And by the way, I did that with a lot of people. I didn't feel like it was fair to put some people in that position. Like, let's take, for instance, say Matt Schlapp with CPAC. Matt continued to invite me to speak at CPAC every year, and I did. And I was very grateful for that experience and opportunity because, one, it's a great experience. 2, it makes me feel good, to be included as, part of that community.
Of the movement, yeah.
Yeah. But there were other situations where, even though I knew the person still loved me, supported me, whatever, maybe there was a little bit of distance, and I understood why. And so it's not something that I pushed, Now I'm a pardoned man, so I think over the next 4 years, I'm going to push a lot harder, with the Trump team and the RNC to say, hey, what WalkAway is doing is amazing, and we need you guys to be
Well,
connected with us.
President Trump publicly thanked you for your video entitled 6 Years Later, Why I Still Walk Away from the Democrat Party.
Yeah.
And, I just watched that video last week. It is an intense and compelling 9.5-minute video narrated by Brandon that details in rapid fire fashion using numerous video clips the destruction, division, and damage that the Democrats have done to America's culture, values, and freedoms over the past few years. The video has gone viral with many millions of views and has been praised by Vivek Ramaswamy, Lara Trump, Mike Huckabee, Rick Ganell, Carrie Lake, in addition to President Trump. You can find it on YouTube at the link we're going to show below, or more simply, just go to YouTube and type the 5 words Brandon Straka 6 years later into YouTube's search box, and you'll get to that video.
Yeah.
So talking about President Trump, he recently pardoned 1,500 people who were charged in connection with the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, the so-called insurrection. You were one of those pardoned. So how did you find out that you were one of those 1,500? Did you get a letter from him or from the Justice Department? Or did you get a phone call from your probation officer? How did you know that you have a pardon?
Ed McMahon showed up at my door with a great big
You're a
pardon
winner.
certificate. No. I hate to let you down, but here's the story. Trump had been saying for a long time that on day one he was planning to pardon some J6ers at least, right?
Yes.
And so here we are, January 20th. It's inauguration day, and I'm sitting there going, I didn't hear anything. I'm like, oh boy, this isn't good. And but I'm also in constant communication because now I'm friends with dozens of people who've gone through January 6th, even though we didn't know each other before, but we've gone through this together. And nobody had heard anything, so I'm like, okay, well that's a good sign. It gets to be, he gave his address and then he went to the Capitol Arena and in front of all those people said, I'm going to be going back to the Oval Office and pardoning some of these J6ers and I'm still going, oh my God. So sat there glued to the TV and he goes back to the Oval Office and then all of a sudden it appears on the TV, Trump pardons 1,500 J6ers. Well, I start freaking out because I knew that about 1,587 people had been charged. So I'm thinking, did 87 people not get pardoned? And who are they? Right? But it was probably about an hour after that, I got a call from my attorney and he said, I just read the executive order. You're pardoned. Congratulations. That's how I found out. And then I had already booked an interview that night with Greg Kelly on the Greg Kelly Show on Newsmax. So that interview was coming on 20 minutes after I got the call from my attorney. So, and Greg's show is live. So I wasn't in studio, but I was on, Skype and I was in an Airbnb in DC. But I go on this interview with Greg Kelly literally about 20 minutes after I found out I had been pardoned and just started crying on air. Wow. And but I wasn't just crying for myself or crying for the fact that I had been pardoned. I started crying because it just all started to hit me. And, I don't know if people fully know or appreciate, 5 people committed suicide because they could not bear what the government was doing to people. And they just couldn't handle it. And I became aware at that moment that, there are 5 people who aren't here to get this pardon, today. And for them, a pardon came too late. But that's the part I think that really hit me hard. But it was a roller coaster of emotions and really amazing.
And now that you can breathe more easily, we talked earlier today about getting even, about some vengeance. Is there a chance that you can seek monetary damages for what they did to you? You lost 4 years of your life, basically. You couldn't do what you want to do. You couldn't travel. you were treated like a criminal.
Right.
And perhaps the Justice Department that's now in effect under President Trump will be open to making a settlement with you and other J6ers for the unreasonable treatment that they put you under.
Well, that's certainly the hope. And so to answer your question, yes, absolutely. I'm going to be pursuing justice. I'll say justice. It's not
justice.
It's not about the money, although I mean that's a big part of the justice, to be quite honest. But it's there's got to be some acknowledgement that what happened was unacceptable, and that honestly there's some contrition on behalf of the government. And my hope is that, whatever form that action takes, which is at this moment is, not totally fleshed out, that they will in fact be open and amenable to some sort of coming up together of the meeting of the minds. And that, this isn't something we're going to fight out in the courts. So I would certainly hope that something like that wouldn't happen.
Right.
And
well, you deserve some kind of settlement for the torture that you've been through.
Yeah, and the destruction to my name, my reputation, my organization, my career, it's been so much. And honestly, I would like an apology. They didn't do it. Trump didn't do it. The Trump DOJ didn't do it. But I think given that we now have a good and noble man in the office and a good and noble government, I would like a good and noble government to apologize for the actions of...
Right. So I would say that if they agree to some sort of monetary settlement, you should say, one last thing. I want a letter of apology, and the one that says I've been pardoned.
Right.
You want that for your records.
I like that.
You want to hang that on your wall. Right. Brandon, thank you for spending time with me today, and thank you so much more for your courage and successful efforts to educate Americans about the hypocrisy of the left and to encourage them to walk away.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. And I'd just like to say thank you for your ongoing support of the organization, of the movement, and always great to talk to you. And thank you for always being a supporter and advocate. It means the world. Thank you.
Since its founding in 2018, more than 750,000 people have joined the WalkAway movement. That's over 750,000 fewer votes for Democrats and 750,000 additional votes for Republicans. It's a meaningful swing of 1.5 million votes. If you would like to help Brandon continue his successful efforts to get Democrats to make that switch, then please make a tax-deductible donation to the WalkAway Foundation. You can find it on the web. It's all one word, walkawayfoundation.org, and click donate. I hope that you will. I did. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this episode of Life Lessons with Dr. Bob, please subscribe, and you'll be automatically notified of future podcasts in this series.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Life Lessons with Dr. Bob. If you enjoyed these interviews with some of today's most influential thought leaders, please follow and rate the show on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget, you can also watch each episode on YouTube as well. We'll see you next time.